everyone, this is Maki. Today's episode delves deeper into the world of the Universal Century. Previously, we discussed the differences between the original Universal Century and Gundam Unicorn and explored themes such as the origins of the conflict between space noids and Earth noids. Today, we will examine elements of both the world of Gundam Unicorn and the original Universal Century. Studying these aspects can help us deepen our understanding of other Gundam series as well. This topic is also closely tied to the story in the Hathaway movie. This time, we are focusing on the voting rights of space immigrants and elections within the Earth's Federation government. It's a tricky topic. However, if we take the time to analyze it thoroughly, we'll be able to uncover the true meaning behind Lobrace's box. Before we jump into the main topic, I have a quick announcement. My channel has a membership program for those who want to support it. For 99-cent month, you can get a name badge and special comment stamps. Alright, then let's begin our research. First, let's examine the election system in the world of Gundam Unicorn. It's mentioned in the scene where Full Frontal speaks with the protagonist, Bunny. Each side is granted autonomous rights, but the central government monopolizes the authority to appoint leaders. Currently, they don't even have voting rights in the central government. In other words, space noids are effectively stripped of their right to participate in politics. That's the gist of what Frontal says. The sides, which are federations of space colonies, are officially granted local autonomy. However, the Earth's Federation central government exclusively holds the authority to appoint their leaders. Therefore, even though they are recognized as independent regions, they are actually under the complete control of the Earth's Federation government. In the novel, Lonnie Garvey also touches on the voting rights of people under Federation rule. This is mentioned in Volume 6. When forced migration began and the size had grown large enough to be considered nations, people living in space finally realized something. They had no voting rights in our central parliament. They didn't even have the authority to choose their own side leaders. No matter how hard they worked, they weren't recognized as a nation. Instead, they were treated as local governments subordinate to the central administration. This had all been secretly planned from the beginning of space colonization. In the world of Gundam Unicorn, space noids have no voting rights. But is such a policy possible in the first place? Denying people the right to participate in politics is essentially denying their humanity. That said, not everyone in the Earth's Federation government has bad intentions. For example, Ricardo Masnas chose to hold the Universal Century launch ceremony in space, even though he knew it was dangerous. As the first Prime Minister of the Federation, he wanted to set an example by venturing into space himself. There were people with good intentions within the Federation government. Therefore, it wouldn't be surprising if there were voices opposing any law that explicitly denied political rights to space immigrants. Lonnie's words, "It was secretly planned," may offer a clue. There is actually a hint in Tomino Hathaway's flash novel that relates to this. Hathaway fights against a Federation law called the Special Exception for Earth Residency. This law permits certain individuals to remain on Earth if they are considered vital to environmental restoration or cultural preservation efforts. However, the novel describes the law as written in extraordinarily clever language, appearing harmless at first glance. Through broad interpretation, government officials can justify living on Earth freely. The lack of voting rights may also be hidden behind clever legal wording. A trap that ensures that by the time the space noids realize what's happening, it's already too late. In Lovelace's box, there is a clause that states, if a new type of human, known as new types, is born, they should be actively encouraged to participate in politics. On its own, this might sound like a hopeful prayer. However, if there were a covert plan to deny political rights to space immigrants, then this clause would become extremely significant. It suggests that the current Earth Federation leaders are thieves who stole power from the rightful government. What about the political system in the original Universal Century? It's actually explained in the novel version of Gundam F91, written by Mr. Tomino. Let's take a look at a passage from Volume 1. The election headquarters is located inside too. The electoral districts for central representatives of the Earth Federation government cover all space colonies. Surprisingly, space immigrants are granted voting rights in the original Universal Century. This is one reason why some interpret the world of Gundam Unicorn as different from the original Universal Century. Space immigrants are granted voting rights and elections are held in space. Another important detail is the special exception clause mentioned in Hathaway's Flash. In its original form, it only refers to those who protect Earth's nature and culture. The word politician is not written anywhere. However, the Adelaide Conference is trying to add wording that would allow politicians to live freely on Earth. This is the reason why Maki fights, revealing the true nature of their enemies. If politicians monopolize life on Earth, what will happen to the political rights of people living in space? If politicians were genuinely full of goodwill, perhaps they could collaborate with space immigrants to fairly run the government. But there is no guarantee of that. As Frontal warned, the situation could easily turn into one where space immigrants are stripped of their voting rights. Gundam Unicorn takes place before the events of Hathaway's Flash. Focusing on concepts like politics and voting rights makes it clear how the historical timeline unfolds. It can be interpreted that events that should take place at a later time have already happened in the world of the Unicorn. This may be one reason why Gundam Unicorn tends to divide fans' opinions. Now, let's take another look at political rights in the original Universal Century. In episode 13 of Zeta Gundam, Hayato Kobayashi tells Shirazunobu, even if it takes 10 or 20 years, you should aim to become the Prime Minister of the Earth Federation government. This statement confirms that space immigrants have the right to participate in politics. References to space immigrant suffrage are also found in Gundam F91. This is found in Volume 1 of the novel. Angeist, the older brother of Mike Sarona, served as a central representative in the Earth Federation government and was known as a politician who held cabinet positions in the Central Parliament. That's how he is described. The Rana family to which these major characters belong are, of course, space immigrants. This is in stark contrast to what Frontal said space noids have no political rights. Given this, the idea that Gundam Unicorn takes place in a different world from the original Universal Century seems very plausible. The idea that Gundam Unicorn divides fan opinion doesn't simply stem from the fact that it wasn't written by Mr. Tomino. It's also because there's a fundamental difference in how politics and voting rights are structured in its setting. what are your thoughts on the debate surrounding political rights for space immigrants? There is no official answer to this question. I believe that's exactly why each fan should be free to interpret it as they wish. As I mentioned in a previous episode, it might be helpful to remember that these perspectives come from characters like Fronto, who opposes the Earth's Federation government. The same goes for Lonnie Garvey, whom we discussed today. She too is a member of NEO, Zeon, and is opposed to the Federation. We also need to consider the possibility that their statements contain personal feelings. Of course, that doesn't mean what Fronto and Lonnie said isn't true. But maybe we can consider all possibilities without rejecting any of them outright. In other words, the Earth's Federation may officially recognize political rights for space immigrants. But those rights are entangled in cleverly written legal language. The laws are written in such a way that politicians on Earth can interpret them however they want. Only a tiny number of people are even aware of this manipulation. That's one possible interpretation. Of course, this is just my personal take. However, the idea that the Federation hides convenient phrasing within its laws, and only a few people have noticed aligns with the stories written by Mr. Tomino. That's exactly what Hathaway Noah and Maki are about. At the Adelaide conference, a new law is being proposed and hardly anyone sees the danger except Mufti. It's the same kind of situation. This is definitely a complex and tricky subject, but focusing on this kind of element can make exploring the world of the universal century really enjoyable. If you'd like, I'd love to hear your thoughts too. Thanks so much for watching until the end. See you in the next episode.